very briefly. Now, over to Giuliano Gabbani, who's going to talk about the reconversion of biomethane and LNG for heavy vehicles. I was talking to him last night, so we've got some interesting comments, I think, for you on biomethane and LNG for heavy vehicles. But perhaps you could try to summarize a bit, as we did have some conversation about this last night. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody, and most particularly the organisers. The problem that many of you have already flagged up is that we have temperature changes, which are a big factor in climate science. And we also have this a big problem in fine particle pollutions. These are one of the major problems that we've got to tackle. They are a big factor in acid rain, and this is one of the things that is damaging our climate very considerably. This is an example. In the area of Padua, in the plain there, you can see it's not just PM 2.5, 2.5, it's or PM10. There are even fine particles which are transferred into the blood directly, and some of them can enter the lungs, which would be in a way similar to through smoking. But the very finest of the fine particles can actually get into the blood and can cause major problems to the human body in general. If you're at the seaside or in a port, you would notice, I think, that there are a number of ships usually in the port and the engines are not always off. Even if the cruise ships are waiting for passengers to board, the engines are often on. They have generators on board, high power generators, 1 or 2 megawatts minimum, and they use a very damaging fuel which has lethal side effects. And this is a major problem which we've got to tackle. We have seen that there are some protected areas in a number of our countries. This is true in America too. There are some coastal and maritime areas where there are emission control zones, but we haven't actually got this far in Italy. We don't have this in any of Italy, and we don't in most of Europe. And these are standards which would be very valuable, because if they're stringent enough, and they often are, they would not allow ships to continue to keep their generators operating, pumping out all these very damaging sulfur and other emissions into the atmosphere. Italy has some absolute jewels of cities. I'm not obviously trying to publicize my own area, but Venice is an absolute jewel of a city. There are what we call vaporetti. These are small boats which perform the function of public transport buses in most cities. So we have these vaporetti which are heavy polluters, and we need to use the technology that is now available to adjust the engines to make sure that they can use fuel which is much cleaner. And this could be done in other cases too, in all ships, where the fuel could actually be We could replace some of the fuel with methane, which is a greenhouse gas, but doesn't produce fine particles. The problem with it is that it is very light and it is difficult to store. The problems of methane storage are not inconsiderable. The problems of liquid methane are not as complex as one might have thought. There is liquid methane on the market at 162 degrees. It is stable in normal atmospheric conditions, but you need to have a cryogenic storage tank such as a thermos in order to keep it at minus 162. You need to have a cryogenic storage system in order to keep it liquid. It can be transported. It's not a problem to transport it. It's not highly flammable or highly explosive. The technology which is required for producing the storage tank is Italian. The technology is very important here, and you therefore can't simply decide that all road transport and indeed maritime transport could be switched over to methane. It wouldn't be possible because of storage. If you could have gas methane that did function, that would be one thing. Small vehicles, small lorries could have canisters of methane to fuel them. And experiments have been done with LNG fuels. And it would appear that that is actually more effective, because this is a system which is more effective over a longer period. So it's better in terms of emissions. And it certainly eliminates the fine particle problem. But as Mr. Gattoni has said, we need to have biomethane, and in order to do that, we need to have a whole production chain. So we need to look at how we can achieve this in Europe, and this is quite a challenge. It's going to mean looking at the shipping industry in particular, because in all the major ships, really you have on board a environmental time bomb, and we have therefore got to address this issue as a matter of priority and ensure that the engines are modified so that they can use LNG or CNG fuels as a matter of priority, and it's fast.